Arancinis are an Italian fast food, and instead of getting on a boat and traveling all the way to Sicily, I decided to make it myself. I start by making a risotto. Now, risottos use arborio rice, which, if you haven't seen it before, is a shorter, thicker grain than normal rice. It's very common to see this in French and Italian cuisines. I am using a deep saucepan as the rice will triple in size by the time that it is cooked. I start by putting the rice and the butter into the pan and coating the rice completely. Now, the trick to making risotto is to add a little bit of broth at a time, waiting till that broth is absorbed before adding more. This allows for very good control of the cooking and gives the rice the nice texture that we're looking for. At the very end of cooking, when you think the rice is almost there, you want to add some saffron to the broth. This will give the rice a nice yellow color and a little bit of extra flavor. Set that aside and let cool to room temperature. Then I'm going to cut one large onion into chunks, and since the cutting board is out, I'm also going to cut up some mozzarella and ham into pieces, which will be added to the center of the rice ball later on. Now, arancinis can have many different types of filling. The two most common ones are a tomato meat sauce, and the other one is a mushroom and cheese filling. I'm making the tomato meat sauce today, in which I start off by cooking some very lean ground beef and draining off any fat to it. I then take a large saucepan, adding a generous amount of olive oil to it, and then I start cooking the onion and garlic until it becomes translucent and a little bit of browning on the edges. I then add a can of diced tomatoes. I'm trying to make the sauce extremely thick, so once the tomatoes are added, I'm also going to add about half a can of tomato paste. This will ensure that we have a very chunky, thick sauce so we don't have sauce running out of the rice ball when we build it. Once the sauce is cooked down for about an hour, I add in the ground beef and a whole bag of frozen peas, and then allow this to cook some more until everything is well combined. I also added in about a half a carrot to cut down the acidity from the sauce, and salt and pepper it to taste. Once completely cooked, we'll have a sauce that is very thick and looks something similar to this. Once the rice is cooled, I add the egg and the Parmesan and mix it in. This gives a nice cheese flavor to the rice, as well as help keep the rice balls together when frying later. Now it is time to form the rice balls. I start by taking some rice and making a small divot in it, in which I add the sauce, a piece of ham, and some cheese, topping it off with some more rice, and then forming it into a nice ball. Now, I make my arancinis quite large, but you can make them to smaller ones. With this recipe, I was able to make 12 out of them, but there was plenty of sauce left over, so if you doubled the amount of rice, you could easily get 24 or even up to 36 rice balls out of it. Now, if you have a group of people making these together, let's say 4 people, you would want 3 people forming these rice balls, and 1 person left over for breading, as it can get very messy very fast. Once the rice balls are formed, I dunk it in an egg bath, which is just 1 beaten egg, and then into plain breadcrumbs here, and setting aside, getting it ready for frying later. Now, let's say you're making these things for a party. You could do these steps the day before and then fry it in the morning before bringing it over. For frying the arancinis, I'm using a small saucepan filled with vegetable oil. You don't want to fry more than 2 arancinis at the same time to ensure even cooking and prevent them from being crushed. Now you want to be extremely careful when placing the arancinis into the oil. Best way is to use the scooper that you're using for them and gently lowering them in. They do have a tendency to splash over when you're first putting them into the oil. Occasionally you want to flip them to ensure even cooking, and once they are golden brown on all sides, remove them and place into a flat tray with some paper towels on them. Avoid stacking the arancinis if you can, as the lower ones will get crushed from the ones above them. Once completed, you'll have a nice tray of arancinis like this, and if you were in Italy, or at least the part that I go to, you would find these everywhere in vendors on the street corners, where you would get it in a form similar to this with some paper towel and aluminum foil. If you enjoyed what you watched here today, please leave a like and subscribe. These things are delicious, and I hope you try them for yourself.